I mean, today with technology and communications, we've reached, and also the ability for people to consume art, we've reached a level of individuality that's never seen before in human history. And our ability to express ourselves for anyone, this democratization of the creative process, and also just the consuming the art. So I think that's another interesting fact, that art is really part of everything that we do. And in terms of economy at a global level, it's about like 6.1% of the global gross domestic product, and it averages among countries between 2% and 7%. In the U.S., employment in arts and culture generated about $400 billion in wages for over 5 million Americans in 16. Additionally, economic output in creative economy sector amounted to $800 billion, which included $25 billion in trade surplus for export of artistic and cultural goods and services, including movies and video games. I mean, it's also it's an international business that sets us apart, but also brings people together, I'd like to add. So I think this is really interesting. Also in the U.S., entrepreneurship is, there's a particular focus on entrepreneurship in the creative economy. So there are, in between 2002 and 2012, there's been an increase of the number of businesses that identified as or has employed independent artists, writers, and performers grew by close to 40%. And artists in the U.S. are 3 times more likely than the total U.S. workforce to be self-employed. So it's an entrepreneurial society and economy as well, and it fuels entrepreneurship and relies on entrepreneurial values that are the foundation of this country. I'd love your perspective on that, because you've been part of a number of initiatives that foster art entrepreneurship. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think that it's important for artists, just in general. Let's say creatives, artists, creatives, because I think shared language is important. There's a lot of politics in language, and usually with politics, economics is hand in hand, right? And I think it's really important to say or note that I believe as an individual and also as a leader, that artists and creatives should have the ability to develop and maintain a level of economic stability in the places in which they live, wherever they decide to live. They should be able to do that. And that should be whether or not they decide to work in or with or alongside any particular institution. So I believe that a curator, someone identifies as a curator, and they are skilled and have studied their craft, they should be able to make a living as a curator in this world, whether or not they choose to work alongside an institution. And the same with an artist. If an artist never does a museum show, they should still be able to live, work, and practice. And again, with skill and having, the business acumen, they should be able to, make a living. And I believe that policies, laws, et cetera, should really support that. Any laws that prevent artists from being able to make and be, especially in the city where they live, is really challenging for me. It doesn't really make a lot of sense because, it's like you have artists that are contributing to so many spaces, and people are bringing them into spaces, into organizations, into projects because of their original thought, not because of something that these artists were boxed in to think about. It was in their free space, in their free time, whether they had practiced it before or developed it entirely on their own. They're being engaged because of ideas that were developed in spaces of free thought. Well, you expand those spaces of free thought or original thought when there's the possibility for, especially as artists journey on in life, in age and also, personal social responsibility, you're able to dream a bit bigger, better, more when you know that you are able to make a living, continuing those thoughts. And you find that a lot. I remember years ago going to this store. I want to say, I know it was in New York, but it was in an area that had a bunch of small bars. Can't remember at this time. But the gentleman, everything that he sold in this very, very little space was only from these craftsmen in this very specific area of Nepal, just this tiny little spot. And he explained to me that the main reason why he had the store, even though, business was good, up and down, was that he kept the store because he wanted to make sure that the creative economy, for lack of a better word, in that village, that they were continuing to make these pieces. Because if there was no longer a demand for this type of craftsmanship, then they would start to do something else. They would start to look for materials that were cheaper, processes that were faster. They would look for other avenues as opposed to preserving the high quality craftsmanship that existed, culturally for centuries. And so, he was developing this opportunity for them to maintain stability while still being able to pass down their craft and seeing it as a lucrative opportunity, or at least a sustainable opportunity. And so that's a one way of talking about that specifically, but I'd be happy to expand on any specific areas that you like.